You're a mean one, Mr. Grinch. You really are a heel. You're as cuddly as a cactus and as charming as an eel, Mr. Grinch. You're a bad banana with a greasy black peel.
Thank you to everyone for coming to Garden City today, showing up and making your voices heard that Democrats must be united in these critical times. We will not accept our Representative Kathleen Rice and her group of conservative Democrats holding our blue wave and our Democratic House speakership hostage. My name is Deanna DeVudiazel, and I am the co-founder of the Young Progressives of Nassau County. We are a grassroots organization that believes that when youth are mobilized and organized, positive change can be made. This summer, with dozens of partner organizations, we organized a Keep Families Together rally in Westbury. Over 300 people from across Nassau attended, and it proved to us that people power is at the center of the resistance. We are gathered here today with our neighbors and co-host organizations, Indivisible of Rockville Center, Garden City, Indivisible for Democracy, and Liberally Long Island, in addition to members from different groups such as Muslim for Progress, Long Island activists, to put pressure on our Congresswoman Kathleen Rice to end her sabotage of Democrats and declare her support for Nancy Pelosi as Speaker of the House. Woo! And Barbara Lee as House Democratic Caucus Chair. Last Monday, 16 House Democrats, including Rice, signed a letter opposing Pelosi as Speaker of the House and calling for new House leadership. They are calling for leadership change without clearly articulating a vision for this country. Considering their past actions and votes, we are concerned that their call for change is an attempt to make House leadership more conservative, less diverse, and more beholden to corporate interests. Boo. Many of the 16 House Democrats, including Representative Rice, Seth Moulton of Massachusetts, and Representative Kurt Schrader of Oregon, are members of the New Democratic Coalition, which is a group of Democrats who support many right-wing Republican policies. Boo. Rice voted to erode the Americans with Disability Act, make it virtually impossible for Syrian refugees to come to this country. She voted to weaken consumer protections and financial regulations through her vote to gut the Dodd-Frank Wall Street Reform and Consumer Protection Act. Boo. Boo. The anti-Pelosi group has not put up a single candidate to run against Pelosi. They have no strategy and no viable alternatives. Their one tentative proposal, Representative Marcia Fudge of Ohio, recently announced that she will not run for Speaker after Pelosi named her a chair of a subcommittee on elections. It's also important to mention that there's been no similar campaign by this group of rogue Democrats against Representative Hoyer, who is running for Majority Leader, Representative Clyburn, who's running for Majority Whip. They have aimed exclusively at Speaker Pelosi. Let's be clear about Pelosi's record. She is responsible for the passage of the Affordable Care Act, the economic stimulus package, the Dodd-Frank Wall Street reforms, the Lilly Ledbetter Fair Pay Act. And remember, it was under her leadership that the House passed a health care bill with the public option in 2009. Pelosi has been endorsed by national progressive and labor organizations such as Move On, Indivisible, NARAL, Pro-Choice America, Communications Worker of America, United Steelworkers, and other groups. The Congressional Progressive Caucus has also come out in support of Pelosi. The co-chairs of the Congressional Progressive Caucus, Representative Mark Pocan of Wisconsin and Representative Pramila Jayapal of Washington State, said,
What'd you say?
We are pleased that Leader Pelosi shares our commitment to ensuring that Congressional Progressive Caucus members are represented proportionally on the key exclusive committees. Additionally, Barbara Lee, a lifelong progressive, is running for Democratic Caucus Chair. She would be the first African-American woman to serve in House leadership. From opposing the authorization for use of military force, the only member in Congress to do so back in 2001, to opposing the Iraq War, to fighting to repeal the Hyde Amendment, to implementing implementing Medicare for all, she has proven that she has been on the right side of history for her entire career when it comes to progressive policies and issues.
Yeah!
She would be an outstanding House Democratic Caucus Chair and provide the moral clarity, leadership, and vision that our country so desperately needs in this critical time. Not to mention, African American women are the backbone of the Democratic Party, and they deserve a seat at the table. In summary, Rice has failed to represent her constituents. She only shows up at election time. Her last town hall about general issues was almost 2 years ago. Where has she been? She deserves to be primaried. In a statement, Move On left open the possibility of supporting primary challengers to Democrats who do not support Representative Pelosi. They said, if right-wing Democrats end up helping Republicans by voting against Nancy Pelosi as Speaker, they can expect to face serious backlash from the same energized and mobilized base of progressive voters that just brought Democrats a majority in the House. They're talking about us, which could certainly extend to primary challengers. We need bold leadership. Now is the time for Democrats to come together, united across Long Island and America, to most effectively resist the Republican and Trump administration's heinous extremist agenda. We need Representative Rice to realize the critical moment we are in our country and to stop sabotaging Democrats and our best hope in the House of Representatives to keep Trump in check. Thank you. Now we're going to introduce the leaders of Indivisible of Rockville Center. They are grassroots group and also constituents of Representative Rice. Please welcome Jamie Jordan, Leslie Rose, and Mariana Rocco. Thank you.
Yep, there you go. Hi guys, I'm Jamie Jordan, and I'm a co-founder of Indivisible of Rockville Center, as Deanna said. We do not blindly support Democrats who don't truly support the progressive agenda. In 2 years of resistance, Kathleen Rice has been practically absent. We haven't seen her at all. Why is Rice supporting speakers who are to the right of Pelosi while pretending to support a progressive agenda? It doesn't make any sense. Why is she claiming that she's progressive when she actually supports a right-wing agenda? We don't need a fringe caucus. We just got rid of the IDC in New York State. We don't need an IDC in Congress. Yeah. Our country's at stake, and we need her to caucus with the progressives by supporting the current leadership. And Kathleen Rice, we will primary you in 2 years if you don't get on board with what the real progressive agenda is for Democrats.
We are influencers. We try to be influential in terms of having our elected candidates whom we voted for, do the things that we voted for them to do. So we will keep Kathleen Rice's feet to the fire, and we are Indivisible Rockville Center, and we're so glad to be here to support Team Pelosi and keeping democracy blue.
Excellent.
Yeah. Excellent.
Who's going to speak next? Thanks for organizing, Deanna.
Okay, up next, thank you ladies of Indivisible Rockville Center. Let's hear it again for them. Okay, up next we have Nikhil Goyal. He is an education activist. He's also a published author about issues about education, equity, and opportunity.
Yeah. All right.
And he is here to speak to us about why we need to hold Representative Rice accountable. Give it up for Nikhil Goyal.
My name is Nikhil Goyal. I'm an adjunct professor of sociology of education at NYU and a public education organizer. I just had a few words to say. We are in the middle of an unprecedented crisis in this country. We have a racist, misogynistic, sexual predator in the White House. A president who emboldens neo-Nazis and white supremacists, who separates children from their parents, who wants to take health care away from millions of Americans, who denies the existence and threat of climate change, who gave corporations and billionaires tax breaks while increasing taxes on working class families. A president who says wages in this country are too high. And we must recognize that Trump is not the cause but the symptom of an economic and political system that has left millions of Americans behind.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Here on Long Island, we have a tale of two islands where some families are living comfortably while others are struggling to keep their heads above the water. It is unacceptable in the richest country in the history of the world for millions of Americans to live in poverty, to live in economic insecurity, to not have jobs that pay a living wage, to attend underfunded public schools, to go bankrupt due to medical bills, to die prematurely due to lack of basic health care, to go to bed hungry at night, to not be able to call a home their own, and to be incarcerated because they cannot afford cash bail. These core problems require bold and aggressive leadership. It requires a Democratic Party not just to stand up to Trump, but they offer an inspiring, hopeful vision for this nation. Demand an agenda that will transform the lives of working people and rally the American people behind such an agenda. So why am I here today? I'm here to express my outrage at Congresswoman Kathleen Rice's sabotage of Democrats and refusal to support Nancy Pelosi as Speaker of the House and Barbara Lee as Democratic Caucus Chair.
Yes.
Let me be clear. The best chance to get progressive legislation debated and on the floor of the House is with Nancy Pelosi as Speaker of the House. If we want to be ready if we are able to take this man out of the White House, if we are able to flip the U.S. Senate and maintain the House in 2021, we got to be ready. So we are passing the most aggressive, bold legislation that will repeal the past 2 years and ensure that we lead to a progressive change for several generations to come. Pelosi has been endorsed by the major progressive organizations. She co-founded the Congressional Progressive Caucus. She voted against the Iraq War. And to quote former David Obey of Wisconsin, Representative David Obey, "We would not have health care today were it not for Nancy Pelosi. There were all kinds of people, both in our caucus and in the White House, who were willing to settle for 1/10 of a loaf." And she said, "To hell with that. We were sent here to do more." There are thousands of Americans who are alive today because of Nancy Pelosi. The alternative to Pelosi is a right-wing Democrat who will not even give progressive policies the light of day. As Deanna mentioned, the movement to derail Pelosi as Speaker has been orchestrated by a group of right-wing Democrats. According to Think Progress, over 90% of the Democrats who oppose Pelosi have voted with Trump more often than Pelosi. 90%. Many of them are the members of the new Democratic coalition. And if you look at their policy documents very closely, they support rolling back Obama's regulations on Wall Street. They push for more charter schools and teacher evaluations based on test scores. They want to reduce what they call entitlement spending, which is basically Washington doublespeak for cutting Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. Do not be tricked. This is a wolf dressed up in sheep's clothing. This is an extreme Republican agenda. And so when you analyze Representative Rice's record, it becomes very clear. In 2015, Rice voted to fast-track the TPP, which had driven down wages, shipped jobs overseas, and given corporations the legal rights to sue governments. It was opposed by every single labor union in this country, and unions stood outside this very office and protested Rice on that vote, because she said originally that she would oppose TPP, and then she backtracked and changed her vote and came out in support of it. On refugees, in 2015, Rice voted for the American Security Against Foreign Enemies Act. Just think about that title, American Security Against Foreign Enemies Act. This bill effectively banned Syrian and Iraqi refugees from entering this country. This is a bill that President Obama threatened to veto if it reached his desk. He said, quote, "Slamming the door in the face of refugees would betray our deepest values. That's not who we are, and it's not what we're going to do." Secretary Clinton also criticized the bill that Rice supported. Turning away orphans, applying a religious test, discriminating against Muslims, slamming the door on every Syrian refugee. That is just not who we are. And the vice president of the New York Immigration Coalition said, the legislation that was supported by Representative Maloney, Rice, Slaughter, and Steve Israel gave the Muslim ban the cover it needed. It's draconian and it's anti-immigrant. And as a son of Indian immigrants, as the grandson of a woman who was displaced during the British partition of India, Rice's vote was an insult to me, my family, and every single American who calls this country their home. She would have banned my grandmother from seeking refuge in this country had she been the congresswoman in the 1950s. On ICE in 2017, Rice voted to reauthorize and increase funding to ICE. In 2018, she voted for a spending bill that excluded protections for Dreamer. Not even Suozzi voted for that bill. In 2018, she voted for a spending bill that funded $1.6 billion of Trump's border wall. and increased funding for ICE and excluded protections for Dreamers. This was a bill that was opposed by the Congressional Hispanic Caucus, and they said, quote, the Congressional Hispanic Caucus cannot support this spending bill as it would fund Trump's border wall and mass deportation tours. This is a bill that Representative Rice supported. On Wall Street, supported to roll back consumer protections. On disability rights, she voted with only 11 Democrats in this country to gut the Americans with Disabilities Act. Why did she support this bill? The International Council of Shopping Centers had aggressively lobbied her, giving her more than $10,000 in campaign contributions. And that's not all. At the height of Trump's racist birther campaign to delegitimize President Obama, Rice accepted $53,100 in campaign contributions from Donald Trump himself. Rice accepted $53,100 in contributions from Donald Trump himself. And last summer, her spokesperson said, Rice has no intention of returning these contributions. This is an insult to the former president and to his family and every American who believes in equality and justice. And if you look at her campaign contributors, they are overflowing with corporate donors. And she does not represent the people of the 4th Congressional District. She represents her donors, and she's addicted to corporate cash. So let us call Rice for what she is, a Trump-funded Democrat who has been working with the Republican Party to dismantle President Obama's legacy piece by piece. It is time to put all Democrats who vote with Trump and the Republicans on notice. It is time to break this addiction to corporate money, and it's time to stand proudly on the side of working people. Yes. And finally, we are here to demand an economy and a government that works for working families. It is time to fight for the soul of this country, and it is time to fight for a future where everyone has economic security, a decent standard of living, and dignity. And the best chance to achieve an America that works for all of us is with Nancy Pelosi as Speaker and Barbara Lee as Caucus Chair. Thank you.
Wow. Give it up for Nikhil!
Deanna, you too.
Putting Rice on notice. We're not going to take it anymore. Enough with the corporate donations. You represent us, not corporations. All right. Up next, we have Hillary Hess. She is one of the leaders of Liberally Long Island, and she is passionate about holding Kathleen Rice accountable. Let's hear it for Hillary Hess.
So I run an organization called Liberally Long Island, and my whole goal is to get people together to the table for dinner to talk, to discuss this stuff. Because if we're all doing different things at different times, we can't have the same impact as if we work together. And that's a really big part of what I'm trying to do. So we meet every week in Huntington for dinner and drinks, and we talk. And everyone is welcome to the table. I don't care if you disagree with me. I want to hear what you have to say, because if we don't have an open line of communication, we can't be successful. And we need this. I'm actually talking today because I am the parent of a disabled child. My child has been struggling his entire life, and any kind of erosion of the Americans with Disabilities Act is an attack on my child and every disabled person in this country. And disabled Americans are Americans first.
Yes. Fight ableism.
Absolutely ableism. My child is bright, he has great potential, and anyone who wants to take that away from him is going to have to go through me first.
Hillary.
We all have to stand up for all Americans, because that's what we are. So please, pay attention. Rice does not believe in the Americans with Disabilities Act. Now, try to think about what would the motivation for that be. Could it possibly be a corporate interest?
Yes.
Because what it is it protects people with disabilities from losing their jobs because of their disabilities. We want people with disabilities to be able to maintain jobs, which of course helps them maintain a life and a future. We need to do this. We need to hold her feet to the fire, say this is not acceptable. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for Hillary Hess from Liberty, Long Island. Give it up for Hillary one more time. So basically, Kathleen Rice's decisions are impacting real Americans and her constituents, and it's time that she listen, or at least show up to listen. That's the least she could do. Up next, we have another community leader and community activist. He's from Massapequa, and he's also a member of Liberty, Long Island. Give it up for Andrew Grover.
Thanks so much to everyone for coming. My name's Andrew Grover. As Deanna had said, the American people won a hard-earned victory on November 6th. Which will bring a Democratic majority to the House next year. We overcame widespread Republican gerrymandering, voter suppression tactics, and many other obstacles in order to gain that House majority. For decades, we have seen Republicans subvert the will of the people in many ways, such as the outright theft of the presidential election in 2000 and voter suppression schemes that have removed millions of eligible voters from the rolls in Republican-controlled states across the country, which likely gave Trump his so-called electoral victory in 2016. They continue to work to undermine the best aspects of the Affordable Care Act, which ironically was essentially Republican legislation modeled after the health care system established under Mitt Romney in Massachusetts some years ago. Republicans audaciously continue to deny the painfully obvious reality of our climate disruption crisis, which worsens every year and is clearly headed toward a tipping point from which humans and many other species may never recover. We must now begin the hard work of establishing a universal, comprehensive, guaranteed healthcare system which will provide high-quality care to all Americans without exception. We need bold, swift, and comprehensive action to build clean, renewable energy infrastructure and eliminate toxic fossil fuels as a primary energy source, as well as many other urgently needed changes. So-called Democratic Congress members Kathleen Rice and Tom Suozzi and a handful of other corporate Democrats have chosen this moment to attempt once again to subvert the will of the people by threatening to withhold their support for the consensus choice for Speaker unless the Democratic House Caucus adopts rule changes that will not only allow Republicans to have greater influence on the substance of legislation, but also make it next to impossible to pass meaningful legislation without Republican votes. These strong-arm tactics on the part of Rice, Suozzi, and a few others are an outrageous affront to the voters who re-elected them and a betrayal of all of us who worked so hard to bring about a check on the malfeasance of Trump and the Republicans. We are here today to say that there will be serious political consequences for Rice, Suozzi, and the others if they will not stand down and join the vast majority of the Democratic caucus in supporting the majority's choice for Speaker of the House. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew, for that impassioned speech. It is really, really discouraging. All of us here and many more across Long Island worked so hard this past election cycle to get that blue wave, to build that grassroots momentum. And we do not need the people that we helped elected to now sabotage the blue wave, sabotage the House majority with the Speaker, and to undermine our resistance. We shouldn't have to be fighting Democrats to be Democrats.
Right. Let's coalesce.
Up next, we have Michael Marcantonio. He is a community leader and activist and a former candidate for New York State Assembly. Please get it up for Michael Marcantonio.
Thank you very much, everyone. Are we going to make sure that these Congress people understand that their positions are dependent on our consent and on our support? They don't own these jobs they rent them from us. And if they don't think they do, they can call up Joe Crowley and see how far they, how secure their positions are. Let me just say a few things. We, in this country right now, are faced with a Republican Party that is not your grandfather's Republican Party. This is not a Republican Party that we can compromise with. This is a Republican Party that has become a wholly owned subsidiary of corporate power, and the one thing they all agree on is that when they go to Washington, they are going to give our money, our rights, and our power away to those with the most, to those who control the biggest corporate interests in this country, and leave us with crumbs. And the notion that we can compromise with that party, the notion that the problems with Washington are just simply that if we just all come to the table, we all sit down together, and we all talk it out and hammer out a bipartisan compromise, that everything will work out. This is a fantasy. This is a fantasy because those who sit across the table from us aren't looking for the best public policy. They're not looking to go to their communities and help the people. They're not looking to make this country better for you and for you and for all of us. They're looking solely to prevent us from having access to the levers of power so that we, all together, collectively, can make our lives better, can use the government to help one another. They don't want that because they know if we can get that, then they don't have the power to dictate all the terms. And so then what happens is we get Democrats in power. And most of the Democrats in power, with the leadership of Nancy Pelosi, are on the right side of the issues. They're going to fight, and we need to empower Nancy Pelosi. We need to support Nancy Pelosi. She is what stands between a corporate system of the Republican Party, that the Republican Party is pushing forward, and the American people. That is why she needs to be Speaker. And now we have a couple of turncoat Democrats, apparently. All of them, by the way, in this Problem Solvers Caucus are just a who's who of the most conservative Democrats in the House delegation. Number 5 is the leader, the 5th most conservative Democrat. And when you say the most conservative Democrat, what you don't mean is that they just want small government and they want to get back to our roots and they want to conserve the environment and they want to help protect our rights. No. When you talk conservative today, what you're talking about is someone who is very open to corporate compromise. And Tom Suozzi, our congressman, who we worked so hard to get reelected, now wants to empower those conservative Democrats, which in effect will empower the conservative movement in the Republican Party. Whoa! What they want to do is an affront to the progressive values that we fought for, to the Democratic Party that we secured a victory for this November. What they want to do is change the rules of the House so that when we go to Washington this January, instead of passing the agenda that is in proportion to the problems that we are facing, an agenda that will solve the problems that we are facing, we instead have to ask for the Republicans to contribute to that agenda. And again, this is not your grandfather's Republican Party. This is not a Republican Party that wants to come in good faith and help craft an agenda that will help us. It is a Republican Party that will destroy that legislation with poison pill amendments that will make sure that the legislation is either a boondoggle to corporate interests, their donors, who they work for, or it is untenable legislation that will weaken the legislation and make it not work well. And when legislation passed by Democrats doesn't work, they vote for Republicans. When Democrats get into power and they don't show results to their constituents, they lose. And so we are putting the Democrats on notice. If you don't think you can lose, just ask Joe Crowley what happened to his seat.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Joe Crowley lost because he wasn't responsive to his constituents. That's going to happen in every single Democratic seat if the Democrats don't support our agenda. And this group here today, we are just the beginning. We're the tip of the spear. We come as a group, but we stand as thousands. So thank you very much. Let's get to work.
Thank you, Michael Marcantonio. Give it up for Michael. Pelosi. We want Pelosi. We want Pelosi. We want Pelosi. Democrats united now. Democrats united now. Democrats united now.
You got termites in your smile. You have all the tender sweetness of a seasoned crocodile, Mr. Grinch. Well, given the choice between the two of you, I would take the seasoned crocodile.